Chosen one. In ancient Jewish weddings, there was a moment that was sacred above all others. After the ceremony, after the celebration, after the guests had gone home, the bridegroom would take his bride into the bridal chamber, and what happened in that chamber was private, intimate. Just the two of them. No witnesses, no spectators, just covenant love in secret. And here is what most believers miss. Throughout Scripture, God uses marriage language to describe his relationship with his people. In the Old Testament, Israel is called his bride. In the New Testament, the church is called the bride of Christ. We are not just servants, we are not just followers, we are the bride. And a bride does not just encounter her bridegroom in public. Yes, there is the public ceremony. Yes, there is the celebration with witnesses. But the deepest intimacy happens in private, in the chamber, where no one else can see, where it is just the two of them. And I believe that is what God is inviting you into. Not to replace corporate worship, not to isolate you from community, but to draw you into a dimension of intimacy with him that can only happen when it is just you and him, bride and bridegroom, in the secret place. And for the next 40 minutes, I am going to show you how to enter that chamber. I am going to show you 4 truths today. Each one builds on the last. By the end, you will understand not just why solitude matters, but who is waiting for you there. We are going to start with the first truth, the biblical foundation that makes everything else make sense. Here is the first truth. Throughout Scripture, God's most transformative encounters happened in solitude. Not because crowds are bad, not because corporate worship is inferior, but because intimacy requires privacy. Let that land for a moment. This is not anti-church teaching. This is not anti-community. This is both and. You need corporate worship and you need solitary encounter. Both are essential. But what I have noticed is that most believers have plenty of corporate, but almost no solitary. And they are starving because of it. Let me show you the biblical pattern. Look at Jesus, Matthew 14 verse 23. After he dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. Mark 1 verse 35. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Luke 5 verse 16. Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Do you see the pattern? Before major decisions, Jesus withdrew alone. After draining ministry, Jesus withdrew alone. This was not occasional, this was rhythm. Solitary prayer was not the exception for Jesus, it was the foundation. Or look at Moses. Exodus 24 verse 18. Moses entered the cloud as he went up the mountain. He stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. 40 days, alone with God. No Aaron, no Joshua, just him and the presence of God. And when he came down, his face was shining. Exodus 34. The glory he encountered in solitude marked him visibly. Or Elijah. 1 Kings 19. After the showdown with the prophets of Baal, after calling down fire from heaven, Elijah was burned out. And God did not send him to a conference. God sent him to a cave, alone. And in that cave, in the silence, after the earthquake and the fire and the wind, Elijah heard the still small voice, the whisper. And that whisper gave him the direction he needed for his next assignment. Or Paul. Galatians 1 verse 17, Paul says, I did not go up to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was, but I went into Arabia, the wilderness. And he stayed there 3 years. 3 years alone, with God receiving the revelation of the gospel before he ever preached it publicly. His public ministry was built on a foundation of private encounter. This is the biblical pattern. Solitude is not optional, it is essential. Not because God cannot meet you in a crowd. He can, and he does. but because there is a depth of intimacy, a level of transformation, a clarity of personal calling that only happens when it is just you and Him. Now, I need to pause here and make something very clear. There is a difference between healthy solitude and unhealthy isolation, and this is critical. Healthy solitude is temporary withdrawal for the purpose of renewal. You go away to be with God so you can return to people strengthened. Jesus withdrew alone and then returned to the crowds with power. Moses went up the mountain alone and came down with the law for the people. Paul spent 3 years in Arabia and then planted churches and traveled with teams. Healthy solitude serves community. It does not replace community. If you are using solitude as an excuse to avoid all relationships, all accountability, all responsibility, that is not solitude. That is isolation, and isolation is dangerous. Here are the red flags. If you are withdrawing permanently from all relationships, if you are using God time as an escape mechanism from problems you need to face, if solitude is feeding depression instead of devotion, if you are developing spiritual pride, thinking, I do not need others, I just need God, those are warning signs of unhealthy isolation. And if you are struggling with suicidal thoughts, with severe depression, with darkness that is growing, not lifting, do not isolate. Please, reach out right now to a counselor, a pastor, a trusted friend. Healthy solitude produces peace, even when it is initially uncomfortable. Unhealthy isolation produces increasing despair. Know the difference. So let me be very clear about what I am teaching. I am not saying leave the church. I am not saying you do not need community. I am saying you need both. Corporate worship does things solitary encounter cannot do. It celebrates together, it encourages mutually, it expresses diverse gifts, it holds you accountable. You cannot replace that with solitude. But solitary encounter does things corporate worship cannot do. It gives you face-to-face intimacy. It gives you unfiltered encounter with no performance and no comparison. It gives you a personal word, not just corporate teaching. It forms you in ways crowds cannot form you. You cannot replace that with corporate worship. Think of it like marriage. The public wedding ceremony, that is corporate worship, celebration, witnesses, community, essential. But the wedding night, that is solitary encounter, intimacy, privacy, covenant consummation, also essential. You need both. A wedding without a wedding night is incomplete. A wedding night without a wedding is illegitimate. Both are required. Now, before we go further, let me tell you what is coming in the next 35 minutes if you stay with me. I am going to show you 4 truths. The first one we are in right now is why solitude matters biblically. The second truth is what happens in solitude that cannot happen in crowds. You are going to discover 5 things that only occur when you are alone with God. The third truth is about the secret place identity that forms when solitude becomes lifestyle. There are 5 identities you can only access in the secret place. And the fourth truth, this is the one that changes everything, is about who is waiting for you in the secret place. When you understand this, solitude shifts from discipline to delight, from should to want. Stay with me, because what you have been missing is not more sermons, it is more intimacy, and I am going to show you exactly how to find it. So, what does this biblical pattern mean for you practically? Let me give you 3 things. First, your frustration with church might not be the church's fault. Maybe you are not done with church. Maybe you are just starving for what church was never designed to give you. Church gives you teaching, community, corporate worship, all necessary, but your hunger is for something different. Face-to-face intimacy with God. And that does not happen in rows, that happens in the secret place. Second, if you are an introvert and you have always felt like extroverts have the advantage in faith because they love the services and the small groups and the conferences, hear this. The secret place is your native language, Moses was an introvert. Elijah was an introvert. John the Baptist was an introvert. Mary was an introvert. Your wiring is not a weakness. It is preparation for what I am about to show you. And third, solitude is not selfish. Some of you feel guilty taking time alone with God. You think, should I not be serving? Should I not be with my family? Listen, Jesus left crowds during peak ministry to pray alone. If the Son of God needed solitude, you need it too. It is not selfish, it is essential. The breakthrough you are waiting for might require what Jesus required, time alone with the Father. So that is the first truth. Solitude is a biblical pattern, not an optional add-on. It complements corporate worship. It does not replace it. But if you only have corporate and you never have solitary, you are missing half of what God wants to give you. But here is the question: what actually happens in solitude? What is it about being alone with God that is so transformative? That is the second truth. And when you see this, you are going to understand why the noise and the distraction and the constant input have been keeping you from what you most need. Let me show you what happens in solitude that cannot happen any other way. Here is the second truth. In solitude, you encounter God unfiltered. No performance, no comparison, no hiding behind someone else's faith. Just you, stripped bare, before Him. Now, how does this build on the first truth? The first truth showed you the biblical pattern, that solitude happens. The second truth shows you the practical experience. What happens when solitude happens? Do you see the progression? From theology to encounter, from knowing solitude matters to experiencing what it produces. Let me show you 5 things that happen in solitude that cannot happen in crowds. And I need you to hear this. I am not saying crowds are bad. I am saying some things require privacy. Just like some conversations with your spouse happen best when the kids are not in the room. Not because the kids are bad, but because certain levels of intimacy require privacy. The first thing that happens in solitude is you hear God's whisper, not drowned out by noise, not competing with other voices. His whisper. 1 Kings 19 verse 12. After the earthquake came a fire. After the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. The whisper, not the earthquake, not the fire, the whisper. And here is what you need to understand. God often speaks in power in corporate settings, yes, absolutely. But some things He only whispers. And you cannot hear a whisper at a concert. You need quiet. Not because He is being difficult, but because whispers are for intimacy. They are for secrets. They are for things meant only for your ears. What might you hear in the whisper? Your personal calling, not the corporate vision, not the general teaching, your specific next step. Tender affirmation that He would never say publicly. Conviction on private sin that does not need to be exposed in front of others. Direction for decisions only you are facing. These come in whispers, and whispers require silence. The second thing that happens in solitude is you face what you have been avoiding. Because in crowds, you can hide behind activity, behind noise, behind other people. But in solitude, there is nowhere to hide. The silence exposes what busyness conceals. Psalm 139 verses 23 and 24. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me, and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. That prayer only works in silence, because what surfaces in silence is what you have been running from. Unprocessed pain, unconfessed sin, unresolved bitterness, unacknowledged fear. And yes, this is uncomfortable, but it is necessary, because you cannot heal what you will not feel, and you cannot confess what you will not confront. Think about Jesus in Gethsemane. No distraction from what He was about to face. He had to process it alone with the Father. And it was so intense, he sweat drops of blood. That is what honest solitude looks like sometimes. Uncomfortable, confronting, but necessary for breakthrough. The third thing that happens in solitude is you discover your actual identity, not your performed identity. Galatians 1 verse 10. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Here is the problem with crowds. There is always a temptation to perform, to worship like others worship, to pray like others pray, to respond like others respond. But is it yours, or is it mimicry? In solitude, there is no one to perform for, no one to compare to, no one to impress, just you and God. And in that space, you discover who you actually are when nobody is watching. Moses discovered this in the desert. I am who God says I am, not who Pharaoh's court said I was. David discovered it in the fields. I am a shepherd king, not just a shepherd. Paul discovered it in Arabia. I am an apostle to the Gentiles, not a Pharisee to the Jews. Your actual identity only emerges when there is no pressure to perform someone else's version of you. The fourth thing that happens in solitude is you receive a personal word, not just a corporate word. Matthew 6 verse 6. When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. The reward is not just future blessing. The reward is present communication. He speaks to you in secret. Corporate words are important. The teaching from the pulpit, the prophecy in the service, the general truth for the whole body, essential. But a personal word is different. It is specifically for you. Your situation, your calling, your next step. It cannot come through another person because it is meant only for you. Let me give you an example. Corporate word, God is doing a new thing in this season. Everyone hears that. Personal word, in March, I want you to start that non-profit you have been afraid to start. Only you hear that. Both are from God, different delivery systems. And if you only have corporate, you know God's general will, but you do not know God's specific will for you. And the fifth thing that happens in solitude is you build capacity for His presence that is not dependent on atmosphere. Psalm 46 verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. Atmosphere-dependent encounter needs loud worship, lights, crowd energy. And you can encounter God there, real encounter. But the problem is you cannot take that atmosphere everywhere. Solitude-trained encounter needs nothing but Him. And the result is you can access His presence anywhere. Paul and Silas in Acts 16 verse 25. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God in prison. No worship team, no lights, no crowd. Just them, chains, and God. And they encountered Him there because they had built capacity for His presence in any environment. The secret place is your training ground. You learn to encounter God independent of externals. And then you can access Him in traffic, in the hospital room, in the boardroom, anywhere. Because you do not need atmosphere, you just need Him. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but I am scared of the silence, and that is a valid fear. Let me tell you why silence is hard. Silence exposes what you have been running from. The thoughts you have been avoiding, the pain you have been medicating with noise, the questions you have been drowning out with busyness. And yes, that is heavy. Jesus felt it in Gethsemane. The silence was so heavy, He asked the disciples to stay awake with Him. Even He felt the weight of silent encounter. Elijah felt it in the cave. God asked him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" A confronting question in the silence. So if silence feels hard, you are in good company. But here is what I need you to understand. Silence is not empty. It is full of what you have been avoiding. And avoiding it has not helped you. facing it will. So start small. Do not try to sit in silence for 2 hours if you have never done 5 minutes. Week 1, 5 minutes of silence. Week 2, 10 minutes. Week 3, 15 minutes. Build capacity slowly. And let me say this is biblical pattern, and this is my experience. But your secret place encounters may look different than mine. Test everything. If silence produces only increasing despair with no relief, that might be a sign you need professional help. Healthy solitude produces peace, even when it is initially uncomfortable. If it only produces darkness that is growing, please seek counseling. There is no shame in that. So, let me summarize the second truth. Solitude gives you unfiltered encounter. You hear the whisper that crowds drown out. You face what busyness lets you avoid. You discover your actual identity instead of your performed one. You receive personal words, not just corporate teaching, and you build capacity for His presence in any environment, not just in charged atmospheres. That is powerful, and if you only got this, it would be transformative. But here is what happens when solitude stops being an occasional practice and becomes a lifestyle. There is an identity that forms. An identity you can only access in the secret place, and this identity is actually your truest self. Let me show you what I mean. Here is the third truth. You have a secret place identity that only emerges when you are alone with God, and this identity is actually your truest self. Now, how do all three truths integrate? The first truth showed you the biblical pattern. Solitude is God's way. The second truth showed you the unfiltered encounter, what you receive there. And the third truth shows you who you become there. Pattern, experience, identity. Do you see how they build? Think about Moses, the pattern, 40 years in the Midian desert alone. The encounter, the burning bush, face-to-face conversations with God. The identity, he became the meekest man on earth. Numbers 12 verse 3. That humility was not formed in Egypt's palace, it was formed in the desert. Alone. David, the pattern, years in the fields, alone with sheep. The encounter, he wrote the Psalms, he defeated the lion and the bear. The identity, a man after God's own heart. 1 Samuel 13 verse 14, formed before any public platform. Paul, the pattern, 3 years in Arabia. The encounter, revelation of the gospel. The identity, apostle to the Gentiles, formed before his first sermon. The principle is this: public ministry flows from secret place identity, not to it. You do not go public to become someone. You go public because you became someone in secret. So let me show you 5 identities that form in the secret place. The first identity is the secret place keeper. Psalm 91 verse 1. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Dwells, not visits, not occasionally stops by, dwells, lives there, makes it home. And here is what marks a secret place keeper. They run to God first, not to people first. Their default mode is communion, not consumption. They do not need a crisis to seek Him. Their baseline is intimacy. And this identity is formed through repeated return. Every day, the secret place becomes home through consistency, not through intensity. You do not become a dweller by having one powerful encounter. You become a dweller by showing up day after day after day. The second identity is the desert-trained warrior. Every major biblical leader spent time in the desert before their public assignment. Moses, 40 years in the desert before he became a deliverer. David, the fields and the caves before he became king. Jesus, the wilderness before his ministry. Paul, Arabia, before he became an apostle. And the desert trains you in ways crowds cannot. The desert trains dependence, no human resources, just you and God. The desert trains endurance, long obedience in the same direction, not quick wins. The desert trains discernment. You learn to hear God's voice over all other voices, and the desert trains authority. You are tested privately before you are entrusted publicly. And here is why you need this. Public platform without desert training is a disaster. No character foundation, no tested faith, no genuine authority. You collapse under the first pressure. But desert-trained warriors have depth that cannot be shaken, because they were formed in a place where only God sustained them. The third identity is the bride in the chamber. Song of Solomon 4 verse 12. You are a garden locked up, my sister, my bride. You are a spring enclosed, a sealed fountain, locked, enclosed, sealed, not for public consumption, reserved for the bridegroom alone. And this is what bride identity means. You have a secret history with God that others do not see. Communion nobody knows about. Sacrifices nobody applauds. Obedience in hidden things that no one will ever know you did. And here is why this matters. What you do in secret determines what God does in public. Matthew 6 verse 4. Your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you openly. Your secret devotion is your public authority. They are connected. The fourth identity is the still water soul. Psalm 23 verse 2. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Still waters. Not agitated by every trend, every teaching, every movement. Calm center, even when circumstances storm. Grounded, not tossed. And solitude creates this. Silence stills internal chaos. His presence settles anxious thoughts. Time alone with God restores your soul. The contrast is this. Crowd-dependent people need constant input, constant stimulation, constant validation. They are anxious when alone. But still water souls are refreshed by solitude. They return to people renewed, not depleted. And the fifth identity is the burning bush witness. Exodus chapter 3. Moses saw the burning bush when he was alone. If he had been with others, someone would have explained it away. Someone would have said, let us keep moving. Group consensus might have missed the miracle, but Moses was alone, present, available, and he saw what others would have missed. This is what burning bush witness identity means. You see what others miss because you are present, not distracted. You encounter what others explain away because you are available. You receive what others bypass because you have time to actually stop and look. And here is the truth. God may be speaking and showing you things right now that you are missing because you are never alone, never quiet, never still long enough to see. Now let me give you some practical guidance on creating sacred space rhythm. And hear me clearly. This is not a formula. This is invitation. Daily rhythm. Start here. 15 to 30 minutes before your day starts or before you go to bed. Consistency matters more than duration. Weekly rhythm, 1 to 2 hours, 1 day per week. Extended time. Sabbath solitude. Monthly or quarterly, a half day alone with God. 4 to 6 hours. Deeper formation seasons. And if possible annually, a multi-day retreat. Now here is the practical setup. You need a physical space. It does not have to be fancy, just a designated spot, a door you can close. Matthew 6 verse 6. Away from your phone and screens. What do you bring? Your Bible, a journal, nothing else. Resist the urge to bring study materials or books or anything that becomes a distraction from just being with Him. And adaptation is necessary. If you are a parent with young kids, nap time or early morning. If you work shifts, whenever you have an uninterrupted window, different seasons of life require different rhythms. And this is not legalism. If you miss a day, grace, you did not fail. If you cannot do a full hour, start with 5 minutes. The rhythm serves the relationship. It does not earn the relationship, is less than has own. 5 hash is greater than. Now these 5 identities are biblical patterns I have observed. Secret placekeeper,